Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or The Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be going in depth into my week number 15 top 5 defenses to stream of the week. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. Today's video is being brought to you guys by DraftKings Sportsbook, who we're going to be talking about a little bit later. So without further ado, it's playoff time, baby, and maybe in your league, we got 1 week left, but it's almost playoff time, or it is playoff time. So let's get in to my week number 15 defenses to stream. We begin with my number 1 defense to be streaming on the week, the Washington Commanders, going up against the New York Football Giants at home in Washington in prime time. The Commanders defense is currently owned in 27% of leagues on Yahoo Fantasy, so if you play on NFL, CBS, ESPN, any of those other fantasy football platforms, then the ownership percentage is going to be slightly different, though I will note in some cases there might be a drastic difference in ownership percentage. So the Commanders were on bye in week number 14, so we got to go ahead and hop into the time machine back to week number 13 for their defensive stats. Their last game in week number 13 was actually up against the Giants, but that time it was in MetLife. The Commanders defense, without Chase Young, who should be back in this game, had 4 sacks, 1 fumble recovery, and 20 points allowed. And the Giants offense looked absolutely fucking putrid on Sunday up against the Eagles in MetLife. The Eagles defense against the Giants again in MetLife, 7 sacks, 1 fumble recovery, and 22 points allowed. Now, I understand that, Nick, the Philadelphia Eagles defense is levels above the Commanders defense. And yes, I would agree with that, right? I think the Philadelphia Eagles have one of, if not the best defenses in the NFL. And I think the Commanders defense, they have been playing a lot better recently. But even if you want to rank them high, they're probably just around the middle of the league, right? They're pretty average. But then again, the Giants as an offense is just not that great. Like, if Saquon Barkley doesn't take this game over up against the Commanders, which I honestly don't think he is going to do, then I don't really expect this being a super high-scoring game like it was last time out when these two teams played and they ultimately tied. I think the Commanders' defense, again, is a lot better than they were earlier on in the season. They kind of got rid of that stink, and now with Chase Young back, I think the Commanders' defense is going to dominate up against a not-so-hot Giants offense. Next up, we move to the Green Bay Packers, going up against the LA Rams and Baker Mayfield at home at Lambeau Field. 34% ownership for the Packers defense on Yahoo. The Packers also just so happen to be on bye in week number 14, so we got to go ahead and look back towards week number 13 for their defensive stats. The Green Bay defense, week 13, up against the Chicago Bears in Chicago, had 2 interceptions, 1 fumble recovery, and 19 points allowed. Now, I know everyone remembers what happened with Baker Mayfield on Thursday Night Football. Baker Mayfield, back against the fucking wall, shows up to the team a day and a half earlier and somehow leads a 98, 95-yard drive, whatever it was, to win the fucking game. And that was truly one of the most impressive things I've ever seen on a football field. Not because it was a 98, 95, 99, whatever yardage it was, touchdown drive with no timeouts at the end of the game. What was impressive about it was the fact that he showed up literally a day and a half ago, somehow learned the playbook enough to play in a majority of the game because Walford only really got 1 series, and then boom, Baker wins the game. But as we talked about last week, I did like the Raiders defense, but the Raiders defense is one of the worst defenses in all the National Football League. The reason why I liked them was because the Rams offense is just not very good. The Raiders defense up against the Rams in LA, 4 sacks, 1 fumble recovery, and 17 points allowed. Now, the Packers are not some upper echelon defense either, but they're also not complete and utter dick cheese like the Las Vegas Raiders defense. So I fully expect here that the Packers are going to knock Baker Mayfield down back into reality. Snap back to reality. I really think that is going to happen. Now, do I think that the Rams are going to just lay out and fucking die in this game? No, I think Baker will keep the game game somewhat competitive, but Baker also makes a ton of mistakes all the time. We've seen it during his whole career, and I'm not here to shit on Baker Mayfield. I was rooting for Baker Mayfield the whole time. I'm a big Baker Mayfield supporter, but when push comes to shove here, the Packers defense is a really good play up against the LA Rams this week at home in Green Bay. Next up, we move to the Carolina Panthers, going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers at home in Carolina. Their defense is owned in 6% of leagues on Yahoo. The Carolina defense stood on its head up against the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle on Sunday. 3 sacks, not 1, but 2 interceptions, and 24 points allowed. Now, the Steelers' defense that I thought was going to play quite well up against the Ravens didn't really show up in as big of a fashion as I thought, but also in that game, because the Steelers' defense isn't necessarily super important in this equation, I was pretty shocked that Mitch Trubisky looked as bad as he did. Now, I know Mitch Trubisky came in and wasn't awful, but I thought up against the Ravens defense that really isn't that great, that we would see Mitch Trubisky look better. And based upon the injury that Pickett suffered, I would genuinely be shocked if Kenny Pickett ended up starting this week. The Ravens defense up against the Steelers in Pittsburgh, 2 sacks, 3 INTs, and 14 points allowed. And I have been someone, if you guys have been watching these videos over the last couple of weeks or over the whole season, if you're new, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below as well as that like button. But I've been kind of talking about how, hey, I don't think the Panthers necessarily have all the pieces on defense, but they're pretty sneaky good, right? They're not amazing, but they can hold an offense like Seattle to making some mistakes, and they can definitely hold an offense like the Pittsburgh Steelers with kissin' titties Mitchell Trubisky under center to make some fucking mistakes, fluster him a little bit, have him throw a pick, lay his ass in the dirt a couple of times. Again, I'm not banging the drum aggressively for the Panthers, but I do think this is a sneaky good matchup, even if Kenny Pickett is able to play. But again, at this point, based upon what we know and what I saw on Sunday, I wouldn't think that based upon the rules that they've kind of instituted this season, I would be pretty shocked if Kenny Pickett ended up playing. But before we move on into defenses, number 4 and 5 to be streaming on the week, I would like to give you guys a quick word from our friends and our sponsor. They've been on the screen this whole entire time over at DraftKings Sportsbook. Now, if you're a brand new user to DraftKings Sportsbook, you click on the link in the video description down below or in the pinned comment, and you bet $5 on any sport pre-game money line from now until the end of December 30th, you will win $150 in free bets if your team wins. Now, important to note, I stated if your team wins, so you have to win for you to get the $150 in free bets. So I'm going to throw it on the screen right now. After you sign up to DraftKings Sportsbook, I think you could pick whatever you want, obviously, whatever game you want, but I am going to go ahead and go to college basketball because in college basketball, they have the biggest favorites. I want to go with Gonzaga, minus 9,000. Minus 9,000 versus Northern Illinois. I think that Gonzaga, again, they are such huge favorites. They should easily win this game. So that would be my favorite pick for this bet. $5 on Gonzaga, win $150 in free bets as long as Gonzaga wins. Also important to note that if you live in Maryland, you will actually receive $200 in free bets. So back on into things here, we move to the number 4 defense to be streaming on the week, and that is the Cleveland Browns going up against the Baltimore Ravens, 20% owned on Yahoo. Tyler Huntley is in the concussion protocol, but head coach John Harbaugh said that Huntley seems good to me. Okay, sounds good, but if he can't play, then it will be Anthony Brown, and Anthony Brown is a fucking disaster. So I assume Huntley is going to be back under center, and I'm not here to bag on Tyler Huntley because I think that Huntley is a decent player. But the Browns defense, at least recently, has looked pretty solid. Again, they held the Cincinnati Bengals in Cincinnati to under 24 points, 2 sacks, 1 INT, and 23 points allowed. And on paper, obviously, the Cincinnati Bengals offense with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, I know T. Higgins didn't really play in that game, but are much better than the Baltimore Ravens with fucking Tyler Huntley or Anthony Brown under center. So I fully expect the Cleveland Browns defense here to play quite good. And we did just see, not last week, but the week prior, the Cleveland Browns absolutely skull fuck the Houston Texans offense. The Pittsburgh defense, week 14 up against Baltimore. Again, like I said, they were a little bit disappointing. 2 sacks and 16 points allowed. Again, here, I do really think that the Browns defense is on a positive kind of upward spiral here instead of a downward spiral. Now, my only worry, though, is that the Browns run defense isn't the best and the Ravens specialty is running the ball. So that is a little bit concerning, but I still do think that the Browns defense can potentially make Tyler Huntley turn over the ball a couple of times or Anthony Brown. So I think there's a lot worse defenses, if I'm being honest with you, than the Cleveland Browns. This week at the defensive position, the defenses to stream, there are a lot better options than we discussed last week because there were 6 fucking teams on bye last week and there are no byes now going forward. Final team here, the Arizona Cardinals going up against the Denver Broncos. Broncos country, let's ride. In Denver, 25% owned on Yahoo Fantasy. Cardinals play tonight, so we got to go ahead and look back to their last defensive performance in week 12 because they're also on bye in week number 13. Broncos should be without Russell Wilson. If Russell Wilson is able to play this week, I would be perplexed because that injury looked bad. And it sucks that these TV companies like to zoom in on someone's face when they're clearly knocked out. It's fucking disgusting that they do that. I felt so bad for Russell Wilson. And honestly, I need to give Russell Wilson some credit because I did not expect him to look that good at all. At all. I don't think anyone saw that coming. And, you know, it was like maybe the page has finally turned. Like, I know the Broncos are done for. They weren't going to make the playoffs. But, hey, maybe Russell Wilson figured it out, right? Maybe it took 14 weeks to adjust. But obviously, sadly, he got hurt. I hope he's okay. But again, I don't think he's going to play in this game. Arizona defense, week 12 up against the Chargers, 4 sacks, 25 points allowed. The Kansas City defense, week 14 up against the Broncos in Denver. And the Chiefs defense isn't very good at all. I talked about that all of last week. They're just pretty decent, like average, or slightly below average in my opinion against the pass. 6 sacks, 2 INTs, 1 touchdown, 28 points allowed. So, again, assuming Brett Rippin is under center, grip it and ripping it, this should be an incredibly good matchup for the Arizona Cardinals defense. So all 5 of these defenses, I really do like this week in week number 15. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you did end up enjoying, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below as well as hitting that like button. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. Make sure you check out our sponsor of today's video, DraftKings Sportsbook. Again, bet $5 on any pregame money line and you'll receive $150 in free bets if your team wins. Again, click on the link in the video description or the pinned comment down below. And my favorite pick for today would be Gonzaga tonight in college basketball, minus 9,000 versus Northern Illinois. Thank you guys again so much for watching. I love you guys all so much. Hope you all have a great guys' day. And as always, good boy.